Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Crypto Hipsters Podcast, where I interview founders and co founders, entrepreneurs and artists, executives and stay at home hipsters in crypto and blockchain around the world. And I have an amazing podcast for you today. Let's get to it.
And today I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing Lindsey Mallon, who is the founder of Maison and Nadjarina and the CMO, CPO at Splyt Core Foundation. Lindsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to find out quickly, first of all, the first question I usually have for everybody is the same. What is your background and how does it apply to what you do now?
Sure. Okay. So I went to RISD, which is the first the first design school in the whole country. Most people on the West Coast haven't heard of it. From there, I went to New York. I was in the fashion industry. A couple of years in, I kind of had a little bit of a conflict internally, I guess you could say. It was an industry that's built on empowering people. What you wear is supposed to, give you confidence and all these things. However, behind the scenes, it was a really monstrous industry. There was slave labor. The way that people treated each other in the office space, it really was just such the antithesis of what we faced ourselves as an industry, that's kind of when I stepped back and didn't walk away, but I kind of went down my own path and really started focusing on clothing being a platform for education, talking about labor standards, sustainable and ethical business, and how that means a lot more than just the environmental impact of sustainability. It really comes down to the community, the people, and what happens behind the scenes more than just organic cotton. That's me. I've been in the industry about 10 years. I've done everything from launching a brand, design, development, production. So I know the entire supply chain, sales, B2B, online, offline, you name it, I've done it.
Cool. You are, and this kind of caught my attention. It says you are the mother of Maison and Splyt and Nadjarina. There's a lot of news out there that, looking for women leadership, for our women founders and entrepreneurs, please explain your role at each of these organizations. And then how could more women bring a mature feminine leadership presence to their companies?
Okay. That's actually interesting. Somebody else just asked me a similar question about why mother. To me, that was just the most intuitive thing to put. I think, I take a lot of ownership around my titles at these companies, but I think that there's a lot of associations with that, and I don't really lead from a place of hierarchy. I see our team as more of our family. I can have a great idea, but it's nothing if I don't have a team behind me to help execute it. And both Cyrus and I kind of lead with that more servant leadership mentality. So that's kind of where the title mother comes from. And then in regards to females in the workforce, I think that we really need to see more of them. And I think that because for so long, women have been told that we kind of just have to pick one thing. Either you're a mom, you're, sensual, or you're a career woman. We're sort of in this kind of limbo right now. And a lot of women feel the need to kind of overcompensate. And I think a lot of women that I see are trying to fill the shoes of men as opposed to just being themselves in the workspace. But you're your best self and you're the best leader when you're yourself. So, leading with that nurturing aspect, being a shoulder to cry on when there's hard days in the office space, that's not a bad thing. I see that as a strength. So I really encourage that. Yeah, I mean, again, I see the team as a family and less of a hierarchy. So that's kind of my stance on it.
Awesome. I knew I asked because Cyrus did a lot of coaching work with CTI, and I don't know how that relates to what you do, if you have that same background or not. So I wanted to find out that.
I do not. I just have a lot of experience as a female in the workforce.
Great. He did the CTI and I did landmark education for a long time, and that there's a lot of empowerment in that community. So let's begin with Maison Do. When we talk about decentralized finance, most projects are, financial services and yield performing platforms like Aave and Bancor and all them. But you have created a rarity, I think, from what I've seen so far, and that's a decentralized e-commerce system based on the sale of actual goods, products, and services. Could you please walk us through that?
Yeah. So we've been working on our NFT and our whole blockchain system since 2017. So for us, it's really interesting that right now NFTs are popping up and it's very trendy. And people are really associating it with this digital artwork, which is great. We've been approaching it more from a solutions area. So we're attaching it to real life products, and then it travels with it, and it acts as it has smart contracts in it, so that kind of helps create transparency around the sales. So the people who sell it and the people who make it have an automatic set commission that gets dispatched. It's a proof of authenticity after the fact. So if you buy a Chanel bag and then you resell it 10 years from now, Chanel can kind of track that data around what that value retention is. And there's so many other things that happen with it. And then with the DeFi, we're the first company attaching off-chain assets into DeFi. And we're doing that because, that's kind of, for us, it feels like more where the solutions are needed, especially in clothing and I think a lot of other production areas. People don't see the money for anywhere from 6 to 15 months. I know that in fashion and luxury, it's 12 to 15 months from the day that something's developed. And that's a really long time for people to have to front money. So able to be in the wholesale area, you really need either a lot of money behind you or you need something like this. And it's really hard to get approved through all the natural portals if you're a new business and, all of those things that kind of work against you. So with our system, you can go on, and if you've been selling for X amount of time, now we have data on your sales history and how much you sell. And we can say that, you have $50,000 worth of inventory. So based on your sales, we have X amount of data. We can give you a loan for $10,000 based on how fast we think we can liquidate your inventory if you default or whatever other factors, or, if you've been in the system for a much longer time, we might be able to say, hey, we can give you $30,000 or, whatever the agreement is between you and the loaner. And then if you default on that, we have a flash sale system. So from there, we can just go and quickly liquidate stuff, and the off-chain assets sit in a warehouse. So they're verified that all that inventory exists and it's real and it's valid. And then we have a lot of systems for onboarding brands initially to validate that they're true and they are who they say they are. So there's a lot of security that happens along the way. But yeah, that's kind of how we approach it, which is definitely a little bit out of the box next to how everyone else is doing it. But we're hoping that it helps create a lot of solutions for a lot of brands trying to scale and grow.
So let me see if I understand this correctly. The benefits for the NFTs and for what you do are different for wholesalers versus the retailers, right? So are they, and how are they different, and how do they benefit both?
So once you're in our ecosystem, you start minting NFTs eNFTs against your product. That can happen from the brand side, that can happen from the store side, that can happen anywhere in the process as long as it's against verified inventory. Longer term, we want to start attaching it to the raw supply chain, like all the way down to the metal that was dug up or whatever. So we can start enabling complete transparency along the raw material supply chain, but that's probably like a year or two from now. But no, the eNFT regardless is the same. So if I'm a brand and I attach it and then I sell it to a Net-a-Porter, that's the same NFT that they can, if another brand isn't in our system quite yet, Net-a-Porter can go on and they can attach eNFTs to all of their products.
I understand. Great. I know I do. I do. And I want to talk about that supply chain because you brought up the metal that gets extracted. And back before my corporate career, I traveled the world for a little bit backpacking. And I went to the Mekong Delta, and I was on one of those boats where they brought the mud up from the bottom of the Mekong Delta. And what they do is they take that mud and then they create a vase, like the ladies in the village create a vase. They get pennies for that. And then they send it to Thailand and they paint it there and they get a little bit more than pennies. Then they send it to China and they put a stamp on it. Then they send it to the US and they put a brand on it. And then you and I, as the consumer, we pay, a lot of money for that. So how can, NFTs, how can blockchain, how can what you're working on be able to benefit the ladies who are creating, those vases in the Delta and who are getting pennies today?
Well, hopefully, if we start attaching that eNFT to the entire supply chain, it enables that transparency. So I don't know if you saw, and I don't remember the exact name of the brand that did this, but a few months ago, right in the middle of COVID, this brand kind of went out and they audited the supply chain for a bunch of clothing brands that were claiming full sustainability measures. I don't want to call out any names, but there was one brand that claims that they're like the most sustainable thing outside of being naked. And I think they got like a 70 or something on the report. And it was kind of like, aha, how sustainable is your supply chain? So I think that the consumer is really starting to be aware of that and start demanding it a lot more. So hopefully the consumer demand really starts driving that change. And if we can start implementing this on a universal level, that eNFT can verify that. We can go down the entire thing and we can say, this is where this was, the raw material was gathered from. You can put in whatever metadata you want. So we could even say like how much people got paid and what the factory conditions that might be a little bit extra, but we can start monitoring that and create complete transparency around that. So you really can see, this bag, the leather came from here. It was actually natural dyes. It's not just a greenwashing tactic saying that it was natural dyes. The meat from that also got sourced out and used for food and, whatever measures are involved. I think that transparency around that is really important because like you said, behind the scenes and the further down you get in the supply chain, it really is disheartening. Which is exactly why we're doing what we're doing. And that's, for my clothing line, Nadjarina, that's exactly what that storyline is don't forget about the people behind the brand because they're not talked about. Sustainability is a huge measure right now, but everyone's focusing on organic cotton and, all those things. And I love that. That's great. It's a step in the right direction. But personally, as a consumer, I don't really care if it's organic cotton. If somebody in a third world country got paid 5 cents that day to make that shirt, to me, that means nothing at the end of the day, So we're moving in the right direction. And I think that with education and with access to that, and the more that, COVID's starting to highlight the people behind things, just because so many jobs were lost, a lot of brands turned around and they canceled production orders that were already sewn. So then the manufacturers couldn't pay their employees. All of these things are surfacing. And I think that that's a great thing because people are finally talking about the people behind stuff. And our eNFT can help create that transparency around that whole system.
Great. So I'm going to dive a little bit more into there because your specific industry is luxury fashion, right? So how can you create more equitable opportunities at the specific fashion supply chain, and what do you think needs to be done there further globally?
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
No problem. I want to take what you just said and look at the luxury supply chain because you deal with luxury goods and services, products, and fashion, luxury fashion. What do you think is being done now, and what needs to be done?
I think it just comes down to really the transparency of stuff. Greenwashing is a huge tactic. Everyone from fast fashion brands like H&M all the way down to the luxury brands are all kind of screaming sustainability right now just because it's trendy. A lot of them are starting to move things internally to actually coincide with that. But we're probably only 10% there. So I think it's just the consumer really needs to start demanding that full transparency, and hopefully this universalized system that enables that.
Great.
I don't know if that fully answers your question.
It does. I mean, it does. there are a lot of unknowns still, in
Right.
creating that equity. And
Right.
one of the things that you said that caught my attention was wealth is the freedom to live the life that you want. That's your quote. So let's talk about fair trade and opportunity and the creation of wealth and freedom within. How do we achieve it? Through conscious luxury and mindfulness.
I think that just comes to kind of like a cultural reset. Everything behind the scenes hasn't been talked about, and we're a very flashy culture, and it's about how much money you have and all of these things, and wealth is what it is on Instagram essentially. But for me, it's different. It's wealth is your freedom. It's the ability to do whatever you want in your day and live the lifestyle you want without the restraints of having to worry about your bank account. But what is that freedom if it's at the cost of somebody else's freedom? And I think that's what happens most of the time right now. People are lining their pockets, but what's happening on the backside is their employees are underpaid and can barely make a living. I read somewhere that Walmart intentionally doesn't hire people full-time just so that way they have to go on whatever state care because they don't want to have to deal with benefits or any of those things. I don't know how legitimate that is, but just that general ethos applies to a lot of big corporate companies. So yeah, I think just kind of resetting how we see wealth and what that means, and instead of it being an individual thing, slightly more communal. And I know that the communal aspect isn't necessarily going to appeal to the masses, but I mean, how much do you really need at the end of the day? If you're living the life that you want and you're prosperous and you don't have to worry about money and all that stuff, if you have an abundance of money somewhere else, does it really matter if you start using that and putting it towards employee benefits and better care packages, health care, all of those things, so your employees are happy and they have balanced lives? They're going to come up and they're going to work for you better anyway. You're going to have to hold their hand a little bit less. They're going to be more motivated. They're going to enjoy showing up every day. It's going to, it's very symbiotic. And I think that we kind of forget that. So that's kind of hopefully where we're moving.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think NFTs play a role in that?
Ooh, good question. Well, with the supply chain, we can definitely enable that. I mean, an NFT at the end of the day is programmable data. I'm sure you and Cyrus probably talked about that. You can track whatever you want. You could attach it to people. It can be, it could be an identification you could use at a bar instead of an actual driver's license. This is actually Cyrus's idea, so I'm not going to take credit for this. But his thing is always like when you go to a bar for a female, the bouncer sees your address and all this information on your driver's license. Is that really the most secure thing as a female these days? Probably not. So if you did that with an NFT, you could show your birth date and whatever information that they actually need without giving away information that is that kind of compromises your security. So if you apply that down to employees, you can really, it's programmable data. You can put whatever you want into it. We could start verifying work information, office structures, anything.
Creating entire environments and ecosystems around it that'll help.
Exactly. I mean, that potentially that could go too far and get a little bit scary, but I think in the right balance, there's a lot of potential for the NFT to start solving problems, for sure.
Awesome. So let's look at what your work is at the Splyt Core Foundation. First, what specifically? How's your role there? And what are some of the initiatives that you've been working on with Splyt Core?
Well, I come in with kind of a double persona, I guess. I have my whole decade of retail experience behind me. So we have a team of very strong tech people. Cyrus has an amazing background himself with his consulting. I kind of bring that other side of more what the brands are going to need to make this a seamless adaptation and what things that they'll need within the apps and the plugins. Problems that they're going to have. I've gone through all of this, so I know where the pain points are, how to solve them, all of that comes in. And then also I'm a very creative person, so I'm doing all of our marketing, storytelling, helping deconstruct this conversation. I think one of the key factors in what's making us successful right now is that we are adaptable into existing structures. So we're not saying, hey guys, we built this really amazing technology. I know you've spent hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars building out your online stores, but just ditch that and come over here and then train all of your staff, rebuild a new infrastructure. That's not going to happen. Maybe 5-10 years from now, when people really understand what this technology is, that will happen. But I think a lot of blockchain and even crypto, it's so niche in this small community because it's marketed to, it's the conversations around it are really targeted at this community of people that already understands it. So how is it going to break out of that? And that's kind of where I step in, and our whole team steps in. We're really breaking it down, and we're making it more digestible. You know, the number of articles that I've run through and said, okay, we need to reword this because my grandma isn't going to understand this. Somebody who understands blockchain will, but my grandma doesn't. And a brand owner isn't going to understand this. And if you don't understand it, you're immediately turned off and you're probably going to walk away. So that's probably my biggest role, is really just helping make that conversation understandable to the consumers and the brands and the people who are actually going to be using it.
So I want to talk about consumers for a minute, because a couple weeks ago I interviewed Tim Draper, VC, and he said that the way to achieve mass adoption of Bitcoin is through women shoppers. And from what you've seen, you know, because you're probably the closest person I've talked to who could be closest to that. What are your opinions on that?
I would say yes. I mean, the female is the bigger shopper in the household typically.
True.
I think we can say that's inarguably the truth, which is funny because it is such a male-dominant community, but I think that's starting to change. But on the other side, and more realistically, you know, gosh, I just lost my trail of thought. Crypto also has multimillionaires. It's a very wealthy community. People have grown their wealth. They've made their wealth there. But where do they shop with that wealth right now? I mean, I've seen a few websites for like luxury yachts. I know Tesla is now accepting Bitcoin. You know, there's small companies that are not small. Tesla's not small, but private companies that are popping up that are offering that option. But if you are a multimillionaire, where can you shop at your lifestyle price point right now? Nowhere. You can't go to right, exactly. Like a couple, you can get a yacht and a Tesla and like a couple other things. I think there's like a watch website, but that's it. You can't go to a mall, you can't go to Net-a-Porter, you can't go to any of these multi-brand platforms and shop with crypto, which is the money that you've made. You have to go trade it into fiat, into cash, whatever, and shop with it that way. So that's like I think that's also a very critical thing, and that's Splyt is doing, and we're doing it in the background. So you can either shop with crypto if you know what it is and you're comfortable with it, or you can shop with whatever standard measures of money that you would normally, credit, whatever. And then it kind of works in the background, and we have shopper rewards that you get back that are ShopX tokens and all of these things to kind of build that bridge and build that comfort over. But I think that if you look at it that way, going back to your females, who is shopping, especially in the luxury industry? I think, like, I don't know the exact statistic, but just a quick visually seeing how many runway shows happen, it's probably 80% of the industry is all females. So that's definitely driving your economy. Our shoe obsession is it's driving the market.
I know another thing that Simon's cared about is children, right? And I'm not I haven't bought, you know, new clothes for a while for myself, but my kids get new clothes all the time. So how do you think the children should be, you know, set up to learn about the future through technology? Is that an opportunity there as well?
That is a good question. And I think that's kind of, I'm sure you can agree. I have a 6-year-old. I think that's always the kind of like the battle is these kids spend like 5 minutes on an iPhone and they know how to do more than I do. I know my 6-year-old's literally taught me how to do stuff on my phone. So I guess it kind of comes down to that battle between the tech is the future and enabling them to know how to use it is important. But, where do you draw that line? Because then they also get addicted to it and all these other things. I don't know if I know the answer to that. I know in our household, it's, obviously becoming a little bit more of a common term because our company runs off of crypto. So by default, Mila, my 6-year-old, she hears conversations about it. I don't really know if I know the answer though. I think it's just kind of that slow adoption into it, and most likely they'll catch on to it faster than us. Like they're not, I don't know. What do you think? I'd be curious to hear.
I have an 11-year-old and I have a 7 and I have an 8-year-old, and they are so quick with the technology. You show them something, they know how to do it. And I try to turn on screen stop for the day, and they can bypass it. And I don't know how you do that.
I think it's a password thing. Like Mila figured out how to do that during COVID too, and I was like,
They're growing up. They're growing up smart.
Like using binoculars over, like how are you seeing me use the passcode?
Exactly.
But yeah, I think in that vein, probably they'll just adopt into it and it'll be a lot more seamless. For us, we're so used to certain ways and certain structures and doing things certain ways that our minds are a little bit more rigid to old systems. Our brains are very much pre-wired to like patterns and consistency. Actually, fun fact, I think it's the middle of the night dreaming. Your brain is taking your entire history and it's using that to try and create patterns to predict your future, because that's how much our brains like patterns. So with age, of course, that gets harder set, but these kids, they're so malleable. If you hand them $100 digitally or $100 in cash, I don't know if they would care.
Right. That makes sense. Thank you. So I wanted to ask you one last question today. Thank you for your time. First of all, it's been an amazing conversation. How can people learn more about you, get to know you, reach out? How can they do that?
Anywhere, I guess. I'm on Twitter. I just started a Twitter probably 6 months ago. I'm on Telegram, Instagram, any of those. I'm pretty open. So when people message me, I'm usually pretty good about responding. I'm definitely a for the people type of person. I love the random conversations. I miss going out to bars. Finally, stuff's opening up, but I'm definitely that person that walks in and makes 10 friends and has random conversations. So I encourage people to reach out.
Right. And for your work at Nadjarina and for Splyt Core and for Maison, how can they best learn more information through those?
Each company has its website. Maison's website is kind of just a landing page right now. We're working on a entire branding package that should be out in a couple months. So there'll be a more legitimate website at that point. But there's contacts through all of the websites. There's like a hello or that kind of email. So those are definitely good ways to reach out. Nadjarina and Splyt both have their own websites with all the information there.
Thank you very much for your time, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.